Shalom and welcome to our Tour for the Nations Women's Online Gathering. This is Shira Sherbow coming to you from Sfat, Israel, and I have a special treat for you tonight. After our meeting tonight, I'm going to post a link of a cute video. I think it's going to make you laugh. Get your popcorn ready, get your kids and your grandkids. It's just about a 3 or 4 minute video that we made a few years ago. I loved watching it tonight. The kids were little. I do these little skits with the grandkids, and so we did the story of Moses. And my oldest grandson Jackson, like in my birthday card, he writes, I love playing the villain in all of your skits. So this was the first skit we did. We also did a Hanukkah skit, and we did a Purim skit, and Jackson always likes to play the villain. So Pharaoh, he's Pharaoh in this skit, and Pharaoh is the classic all-time villain. Pharaoh is living in a little fantasy world. This is Pharaoh's fantasy island, is that he's in an illusion. He's thinking that he is God, right? He's thinking he created himself, and he created the Nile, and he thinks he owns this nation of slaves. And I don't know if you've ever thought about what it would be like to be one of Pharaoh's slaves. First of all, Pharaoh is very, very ungrateful. So one of the things that we learn from this story is to be grateful and to be thankful, because it was these Hebrew slaves. One Hebrew slave in particular, Joseph, was the one that made Egypt rich. And that just, that's a classic story of what has happened to the Jews throughout the centuries. They would, be a part of a culture, be a part of a society, do so many good things to help them, and then be turned against. They would, the authorities would turn against them. And so Pharaoh just turns on the Hebrew slaves, the Hebrew people. He turns them all into slaves. And if you've ever thought about what your life would be like, you would have, the slaves had no time to spend with their kids, like no time to sit around the table and eat as a family, all the things that we take for granted. There wouldn't be any conversations about any plans that we were going to have, any dreams or goals that we had. There was no life. Their existence as slaves was just for Pharaoh, just to please Pharaoh. It didn't matter what day of the week it was. They didn't need a calendar. What difference did it make what day of the week was? Because every day was the same. Every day was, our total existence is to just get up and work for Pharaoh. So Pharaoh's in this illusion, but he's about to get a reality check. God is about to make his big debut on the world. This is a one-time event. And you know what? I did this skit with the kids because we're supposed to talk about this like every day. We're never supposed to forget this story, because this is the story where God made his debut to the world. God's like, let me introduce myself. Let me introduce myself in a really big way, and everybody's going to have to make a choice. Everybody is going to have to choose between the false God and the real God. Here's Pharaoh calling himself God, plus Egypt had so many idols. They had these crutches. We're familiar with having crutches. Yeah, our crutches today are probably a lot more sophisticated than, they had the lamb. The lamb was an Egyptian god. And one of the things that God did when he came on the scene was he, just did plague after plague after plague, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he kept being stubborn and not letting the people go. So one of the last things that God had them do, we know the story, he said, to get the Egyptian idol, to get the lamb, and take this lamb and just roast it, and take the blood of the lamb and put it on your doorposts. And if you can imagine what it was like to, the courage that it would take to be in this society where they're worshiping the lamb. And you're making a statement like, this lamb is not God. This lamb is a crutch. we're going to roast your lamb. We're going to eat your lamb for dinner. We're going to take the blood of the lamb. And it was just making a statement like, whose side are you on? And when you took the Egyptian god and you put the blood of the lamb on your doorpost, you were making a statement like, I choose God. There's only one God. I'm coming out of this idol-worshiping society that I live in. And I know that if you are a Noahide, I mean, you have come out of the popular culture. You have come out of, like we would say, well, I would never worship a lamb. I can't believe the Egyptians thought a lamb was God. But think about it. We're just a lot more sophisticated with our idol worship today, but we have a whole culture that thinks a lamb is God. And I remember it was, sometime last year, I had some ladies sitting at my table. One of them was a Noahide and one of them was a Christian. And the one who was a Christian, she asked me, well, what made you come out of Christianity? And I told her, well, it was when I realized that Jesus wasn't God, and that I realized that, only God is God. And she said, wow, that's a pretty strong statement. But it was like, well, you asked. So the reason this whole story happened, and the reason that people had to have the courage to take a stand in that culture, is because they had to put their trust in the one true God. Like, my God is going to save me. We don't have any idols to save us. We're not dependent on the lamb. We're not dependent on Pharaoh or anyone else who thinks. Pharaoh said he created himself. He created the Nile. He wanted everyone to think that he was God. So when all of the slaves came out of Egypt and they were brought to Mount Sinai, the first commandment was, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. So this is how God wants to be known to the world. And this is why this nation, God put his name on this nation for all of us today, so that we have a testimony, like we met God. 3 million of our family met God at Mount Sinai. This has never happened to any other people. And so they're here to testify to us today, like, no idol worship, no mediators between God and man, no anything, no God. Here, let me read to you about the commandment forbids us. This is the commandment that you shall have no other gods before me. The commandment also forbids us to accept any being, entity, or object as a mediator between God and man. And says we don't ascribe duplicating, annihilating, or changing himself. Judaism therefore rejects the possibility that God could have ever assumed human form. So this is the message. This is why we have to tell this story to our children. This is a message that's been passed down and preserved because these people were courageous enough to take the blood of the lamb, put it on their doorpost, and say, like, Egypt, you don't need this lamb. This is a crutch. There's a cute story of a little girl that had broken her leg skiing, and she was on crutches, and the doctor had said, okay, enough. You can put the crutches away. You don't need the crutches anymore. And she was scared to put the crutches down, and she was scared to start walking on her own. And so her dad said, well, okay, I have an idea. You really like, campfires, right? And she said, yeah. He goes, okay, tonight we're going to build a very special fire. So they built a fire, and they got the crutches, and they tossed them in. And so from that point on, there was no turning back. So it was like just that what was going on with roasting the lamb, putting the blood of the lamb on the doorpost, and the angel of death came, and the angel of death killed all of Egypt's firstborn. And then the firstborn of Israel were redeemed and taken out to the desert. But they had a mission from that point on. They had a responsibility for all the rest of us alive today to testify that there's only one God, nobody else is God, not Egypt's lamb, not anybody's lamb, not Pharaoh, no other gods. He said, have no other gods before me. So these people have gone to their death through the centuries with this message that there are no other gods. So it's an important story that we're supposed to, we all have a Pharaoh. We all have a Pharaoh inside of us. Pharaoh is that evil, that temptation. That temptation that comes to try to get us off track, to keep us in bondage. Egypt is like that. Anything that holds us back, anything that is the lie, the crutch, the fantasy, the illusion that we need it, anything that holds us back, that's our Egypt. So we are thanking God every day for taking us out of Egypt, for letting us know that He's the only one true God. And this is a message that we need to teach our children, and so make sure that they know that God Himself intervened in history, a one-time event in front of millions of people. Every other religion in the world is started usually by one person that gets a following, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it turns into a religion. But this was like a one-time event in front of the whole world. Let me just show up. Let me make my debut to the world. I'm God, the only God. And He just takes one nation out of another nation and brings them into the desert so they can learn all the laws, learn how to create a society, make this world a home for God. This is what He's passing on to the Gentiles that want to grab on to the teachings that the Jews have preserved all these years. That's why there's when there is this thankfulness, that the Jews have had the courage, first of all, to come out of Egypt, to put, in your face, Egypt, here's what we think of your idols, here's what we think of your lamb, and to leave that culture, and to leave that mentality, and to come out. So this is prophesied that in the end days, people would start to realize, that people would start to be thankful for this message that's been preserved all these years, and to just come out of idol worship, no matter how sophisticated it looks, and how very hard it is, and how 4/5 of the Israelites did not come out of Egypt. That's the saddest thing. But it's a very hard thing to do, to leave behind what is known and leave behind what we're used to. But if you're watching me today, you probably have done that. We all have our stories of coming out, leaving it all behind, and going with God and knowing He's the one true God. Okay, so I'm going to put up a link to the little skit we did, the video. I think you'll laugh. We were, making costumes, and I was looking at Pharaoh's costume, and it looks like a Kansas City blanket that we got from my sister's house, because my sister loves the Kansas City Chiefs, and she's so excited they're in the Super Bowl tomorrow. And but I was looking at the Pharaoh's costume, and it looks like, I said, is that a Kansas City Chiefs blanket? And I think it is. But anyway, we had a lot of fun making this video, and giving the kids their little lines, and trying to explain the story the best they can. But as they get bigger, I'll make the we'll go over it, we'll do it more. But this is just a very little amateur version of baby Moses and Pharaoh's daughter and the burning bush. You'll see. So okay, so enjoy the video. That's all for tonight. We'll see you next time. Have a great week. Shalom.